Good day, everyone. Many thanks for joining Asian Impact webinar. My name is Dina Ashgalieva, and I'm Senior Economist at ADB. Today, I'm happy to introduce my colleague, Dr. Jiang Yi, who is Principal Economist and Officer in charge of Economic Analysis and Operational Support Division of Economic Research and Development Impact Department at Asian Development Bank. He is the lead author of ADB inaugural 2024 Asia Pacific Climate Report, which was launched last year. And in this webinar, Jiang Yi will share one of the chapters of the report on carbon pricing. After his presentation, which will be short, we will have a panel discussion with four experts, and then we'll have open Q&A. I would like to invite all our wonderful audience who joined to post their questions in Q&A box at any time, and after presentation, we will take some of the questions. Thank you very much. Yi Jiang, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Dina. Let me share my screen. Okay. So before we talk about imposing a positive carbon price, we first discuss how fossil fuel subsidies act as negative carbon pricing, encouraging the use of high carbon energy sources by reducing the prices and reinforcing fossil fuel dependence. In 2022, we estimate that developing Asia provided 600 billion US dollar in financial support for fossil fuels, with 440 billion US dollar in consumption subsidies for electricity and petroleum, and the rest in capital investments and financial support. The chart on the right shows the amount of fossil fuel subsidies and their share of GDP in 2022 across developing Asian countries. Rationalizing and phasing out fossil fuel subsidies have been slow in the region. So governments are urged to develop clear reform plans to realign public resources with climate goals. Targeted measures such as direct cash transfers are more effective for supporting the vulnerable groups during energy crisis. Carbon tax and emission trading system are two major carbon pricing instruments. In Asia now, there's only Japan and Singapore have implemented a carbon tax so far. In the design of carbon tax policies, tax rate, coverage, and the use of revenue are crucial factors to consider. While some advocate the tax rate should be set aligned with the social cost of carbon, which is now estimated around 200 US dollar per ton. Most countries set lower rates for political feasibility. The easiest method for enforcing a carbon tax is to tax fossil fuel upstream. It has considerable advantages for lower and middle income countries, economies in the region. And these economies usually have a large informal sectors and a limited enforcement capacity. Economic reasoning suggests that the revenue from carbon taxation should be redirected to the highest value of public uses. Carbon tax is not necessarily regressive. Proper use of the revenues, such as rebates or targeted transfers, can offset the regressive impacts, ensuring that the low-income households are protected. Uncertainty in emission reductions could be addressed through adjustment mechanism, which adjust the tax rates based on the gap between the actual emissions and the target path of emission reduction. Current evidence does not support that carbon pricing, at least at a low price level, might negatively affect the growth or cause significant inflation. In terms of employment, a carbon tax could result in job shifting, but have limited effect on the overall employment. Political and public acceptance remain the most formidable challenges for wider adoption of carbon taxes. Countries are more likely to adopt carbon taxes if these are gradually phased in, announced with clear communication, and coupled with measures to protect affected industries and households. The next section is about the emission trading systems, or ETS. ETS has gained momentum in the region. 6 out of 13 national ETS established across the world by 2024 are in Asia and the Pacific. So they are established and operated in Australia, Indonesia, Kazakhstan, New Zealand, China, and Korea now. Based on comprehensive review of and assessment of these main ETS in the region, we draw some lessons. First, the benefits and the challenges of efficiency-based system should be closely observed. Second, institutional and regulatory frameworks, including monitoring, reporting, and verification systems, are pivotal to the smooth operation of an ETS. Third, heavily regulated power sectors could be improved in a way to allow carbon price pass-through to enhance the effectiveness of ETS. Last but not least, to add flexibility, countries can also allow for offset use in an ETS. There are potential significant benefits of linking ETS across countries. However, given the complexity, each country should prioritize further development of their domestic market in the near term. In the report, we also make some policy suggestions regarding how to facilitate the linkage across countries during the medium to long term. The chapter of the report also provides an up-to-date analysis of the international carbon markets. Under Article 6 of the Paris Agreement, countries can trade emission reductions through internationally transferred mitigation outcomes, or ITMOs. The ITMOs help mobilize carbon finance for low carbon technology. Development of international carbon markets presents opportunities and challenges for Asia and the Pacific. The Asia and the Pacific have extensive experience in carbon market mechanism already. That means developing economies can use international carbon markets to access climate finance as well as meet domestic climate growth. However, the region still has work to do to scale up investment involvement in international carbon markets. An important first step for many countries in the region is to develop holistic national carbon market strategies. In this regard, the NDC accounting aspect of Article 6 is critical to effective market integration. Natural-based solutions face a significant financing gap, despite its considerable potentials in mitigation and adaptation. The carbon markets can help to address the future of nature-based solutions in international carbon markets appears both complex yet promising. The empirical literature generally finds that carbon pricing, at least at a low level, does not have a significant effects on countries' competitiveness. In the report, we developed a CGE model to assess the competitiveness impacts of carbon pricing at a relatively high carbon price, which we use 100 euro per metric ton of CO2. If only an economy or a subset of economies in the region adopt carbon pricing, they could incur 1 to 3% GDP loss in the long term and the export decrease. While other economies which don't adopt a carbon price can benefit can benefit from this in this scenario. With increased coverage of carbon pricing and the coordination of carbon pricing across the region, the negative effects on the region as a whole actually diminish. But there's still distributional effects, which result in economic inequalities for economies and the sub-regions. Government may apply output-based rebating or border carbon adjustment to help address these adverse effects. But more importantly, carbon pricing schemes are extended to a broader set of countries worldwide. So to summarize, carbon pricing holds the key to reducing greenhouse gas emissions cost effectively. It is imperative, first of all, it is imperative to reduce fossil fuel subsidies and use the saved fiscal resources wisely. The choice of carbon pricing instruments depends on a jurisdiction's goals and the capacity and the circumstances. To some extent, the design and implementation of a carbon pricing policy are more important than the choice between the instruments. Sound policies are needed to improve or complement carbon pricing policies. These include, for example, ETS infrastructure development, wise use of savings from subsidy reform or revenues from carbon pricing, offer labor training and social security to ensure just transition. These are just a few examples. Last but not least, international carbon markets present promising opportunities for the region. Developing economies need to prepare and get ready for them. Let me stop there here. So if you are interested in more detail about carbon pricing and the other topics covered in the report, please visit this link to access our full report. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Yi. I was just checking the questions. We received a number of questions in the Q&A box. Many thanks, audience, for being so active and putting questions. So let me first introduce our 4 panelists. Like as Jiang Yi mentioned, that designing and implementation of carbon pricing is crucially important. So it's very important for us to learn from countries which already experienced. And today we are lucky to have panelists from various countries, some countries more experienced with carbon pricing, and some countries less experienced, only recently implemented or only planning. So first, let me introduce Dr. Shen Du. She's the Program Director of Energy Foundation, China's Low Carbon Economic Growth Program. Dr. Jeong Won Kim. She is Senior Research Fellow at Energy Studies Institute and also Research Affiliate at the Sustainable and Green Finance Institute at the National University of Singapore. Dr. Riza Suarga is a chairman and CEO of Argaus Resources and chairman of the Indonesia Carbon Trade Association. And Dr. Kanittha Tambunlertchai, she is director of the Center for Ecological Economics and associate professor at the Faculty of Economics, Chulalongkorn University. I noticed one of the questions in the Q&A box, which I think could be relevant to our panelists. Here, the question is this something practical for developing countries? Because the given examples, Japan and Singapore, are high-income economies. So we have here 2 panelists from not high-income economies, Dr. Shen Du and Riza Suarga. So would you like to answer this question? First, maybe, shall we start with Shen Du for this question? I can repeat if you want.
Thank you, Dina. I think it's a good question. I would like to briefly share the progress and the challenges of China's national ETS. As we know that China's national ETS was launched in 2021 and has already become the world's largest carbon market by volume. It initially covered over 2,000 entities, representing more than 5 billion tons of CO2 emissions annually, around 40% of the country's total emissions. In a major step forward, China formally expanded the ETS this March to include the steel, cement, and aluminum sectors. This brings in around 1,500 new enterprises and 3 billion tons of emissions, pushing total coverage to over 60% of national emission, a significant move. And China has made notable progress in terms of the market infrastructure. For example, there is a national registry and trading platform ready, and a basic MRV system, monitoring, reporting, and verification system is in place. However, to be honest, the system's effectiveness in driving real emission reductions remains very limited. For example, the China national ATS still uses an intensity-based approach, allocating allowances per unit of output rather than placing a hard cap on total emissions. And almost all allowances are distributed for free, and the carbon prices remain relatively low, typically between 60 and 100 RMB per ton, about 8 to less than 15 US dollars. I think the market design is not yet strong enough to shift investment decisions or to change the behaviors in energy-intensive industry. I will stop here and expect to the further discussion.
Thank you very much, and for sharing China's experience over several years already. So because we have so many questions in Q&A box, I would like to continue with questions from our audience, not from me. Dr. Riza Suarga, I will repeat the previous question and the new one. They are quite related. So the previous one was about, is this something practical for developing countries? Because the given example, Japan, Singapore are high income countries. And one more quite similar from Donghyun Park, our colleague, is carbon pricing and carbon markets are practical options for less developed countries with limited institutional capacity? And if not, what is the best practical option for them?
Thank you, Dina, and thank you, ADB, for inviting me. So I'm just going to highlight or update on the regulation of Indonesian carbon ecosystem. Basically, carbon pricing regulations in Indonesia is sector-based. There are 5 sectors. Number 1 is FOLU, the forestry and other land use, agriculture, waste management, industry, and energy. So, and then the commercialization of this carbon pricing is practically simply implemented through carbon trading, which is emission trading and also emission offsets, and then result-based payment and carbon tax. Indonesia kind of adopting a unique, how could I say, landscape. Some of the countries only adopt cap and trade or tax, but we have all. We have cap and trade and tax. And then for the updates on, if you ask me whether developing countries like Indonesia is appropriate to adopt those, I think Indonesia's landscape and I think other countries' landscape also is a bit unique in respective ways, and therefore Indonesia have a huge potentials of resources in terms of getting the offset markets delivered. And just as I can update you, the ETS or the emission trading that has been established or launched by our president slightly over a year ago, almost 2 years, in IDX carbon exchange have given a very quite unique and also strong signals. I know a lot of people questioning whether the ETS is working or not, or keep delaying and everything. I know that the questions is also being raised before this panel, before this webinar. The answer is I just received the updates that almost all credits that has been posted or has been in the platform of IDX Carbon Exchange almost sold. In particular, that coming from Pertamina NRE, New and Renewable Energy, in particular geothermal section. And surprisingly, these are tech-based credits, and it is being sold for $4 to $5. I think it's much above the market. I think you've seen only one or slightly below $1 per ton. So I think Indonesia has come forward to become the leader, at least in the ASEAN region. And if you also, if I can also update now, Indonesia's president already have a very strong commitment to accelerate the carbon market. We have signed the MRA, Mutual Recognition Agreement between SRN, the National Registry System, with Gold Standard, coming soon with FERA and other standard as well. We'll stop there for now, not to talk about the potential. I think we can discuss that later on. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Riza. This experience of Indonesia is really interesting, and Indonesia done a great progress, right? With ETS was announced, and now you're saying that in carbon market, like carbon credits were all purchased, right? We before this event, we even received a question by email asking how to incentivize interest in carbon market. So what do you think was a success for Indonesia?
Well, I think this is a transition, I can say, from the previous administration to the new one. I'm not saying the previous one is quite different or not supporting the ecosystem, but I can promote to all of you today that under the new president Prabowo, the strong commitment is there. We are opening up the market. We recognize international standards, unlike before. Now, even the revision of the previous presidential decree is ongoing process, and we will be recognizing voluntary market as now as before. Voluntary market was not part of the equation, so everything was kindly directing to the compliance. Incentive-wise, I think there are still some kind of pro and cons on that. So far, I think the ease of doing business of carbon project development are ongoing, and we've seen a lot of interest and a lot of foreign direct investment also keep coming. And because as a chairman of the Indonesia's Carbon Trade Association, and also I'm a carbon project owner and carbon project developers myself, we've seen a lot of good excitement coming soon. And of course, Indonesia, with the new sovereign wealth fund Danantara, is somewhat planning on establishing the climate change trust fund. And I think there will be some having the skin in the game. Hopefully, we can speed up and boost the market across the region.
Thank you so much, Riza, for sharing your experience with Indonesia. That's really fascinating. And allow me to move to the next question. Just a second. Yeah, so we're receiving many very important questions focusing on developing countries. So thanks for that. Sorry. Okay. From the question came from Riza bin Mohsin. I hope I pronounced the name correctly. What important matters to observe if a country to introduce carbon tax and ETS? Whether it's good to have this implemented in developing countries or not, what is best? So I think Jeong Won did lots of studies on this topic. She studied from the experience of Republic in Korea and Singapore, because Singapore has carbon tax while Republic of Korea has ETS. So I think she would be a good person to answer this question.
Thank you, Dina, and thank you, ADB, for inviting me as a panel. Yeah, thank you for the question. Important matters to observe it. If a government wants to introduce the new carbon pricing scheme, I think there will be some concerns about the new carbon pricing scheme as a new environmental regulation, and then the major concern would be the related about the business losing the business competitiveness. But as E presented the earlier of this webinar, actually the empirical analysis does not fully support that the carbon pricing itself will negatively impact the macroeconomic performance of the countries. And also, during the last couple of years, the ESI research team, we worked on evaluating some carbon pricing schemes and macroeconomic performance, and then also decarbonization performance of selected countries. And then we also did not find any statistically significant evidence for that kind of significant negative impacts of carbon pricing on the selected countries' economy. So based on this, government may take an effort to raise awareness of the benefits of carbon pricing scheme for the general public and then also the business sector. And then also they should really take care of some the design of the carbon pricing schemes. And actually the other countries' example shows that when they launched the carbon pricing scheme, the carbon pricing scheme has combined with some protectionist measures, including some discount tax rate or some free allocation of allowances, and then also some exemptions of the liable sectors. And then over time, as time goes by, the business sector has accustomed to has prepared for the carbon pricing scheme. That kind of the protectionist measures started to decrease and then reduced. And recently, the highlight is put on some revenue recycling to relieve the possible negative impacts of the carbon pricing scheme. So, so just in brief, when the governments introduce a new carbon pricing scheme, the government should consider how to raise the public acceptance of the carbon pricing scheme, and then how to not to damage their business competitiveness, and then also how to support their kind of the impacted households and then impacted businesses. Yeah, how to support them with a kind of the relative and then appropriate revenue recycling scheme. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much, Jeong Won. Actually, I see you complemented a lot to presentation from from Yi Jiang, because he said that regardless of what policy you choose, carbon price or ETS, what's important is the design. And then also it's important, the challenges countries facing is the raise public acceptance and how it's important to compensate to affected businesses and households. So that's a lot like what he said, but you provided some more details how exactly could be done. So I still remember how Singapore announced their plans for carbon tax. They put for many years ahead how price will rise and how the money, the revenue will be used to compensate to businesses or households. So that is very interesting example. I would like to invite Dr. Kanittha because she is from Thailand, and it's interesting that Thai cabinet approved this ministerial regulation just recently in January 2025. With introducing carbon tax of 200 Thai baht per ton of CO2 equivalent into existing excise tax. So I think this question also relevant to Kanittha because they probably were choosing between ETS and carbon tax, which one is better and how to design. So Kanittha, please.
And thank you, Dina, for and also thank you the audience for the questions and for ADB for the invitation. So let me share Thailand's experience. So I think as a developing countries, I think Thailand faces many of the concerns raised by in the Q&A. So the government was initially quite concerned about hurting businesses. So they were a bit cautious about adopting economic instruments. But I think governments realized that it needs to be done. So they set up essentially a working group to discuss the use of economic instruments. Essentially, in Thailand, the approach we used is that we designed a whole new regulation, a new act on climate change. And while discussing the act, the working group realizes that it would take some time for the economic instruments to be implemented. And as such, it was decided by the Ministry of Finance that they could utilize existing mechanisms, which is the excise tax, to first launch the carbon tax. And let me explain a little bit. So because Thailand benefits from the implementation of many countries before us. We could take the lessons learned from many countries around the world and then adapt it to suit the Thai context. So one of the things that we're doing in Thailand is to do a phased approach. So we started first with the excise tax because it's already a mechanism that's already in place. The target initially is fossil fuel because that accounts for about 70% of emissions of greenhouse gases in Thailand. And when we implement the excise tax in Thailand, we already built into the excise tax rates impacts on the environment. So when we do the carbon tax in Thailand, we substituted a part of the excise tax and earmark it as carbon tax. This is just to make the presence of carbon tax known to stakeholders. So it doesn't raise the price in the interim period, but it does highlight the fact that we do have a carbon price and it sends a signal that the government is going to impose carbon prices from now on. So in the initial phase, the price of petroleum products doesn't increase just yet, but it does raise awareness among the stakeholders that they have a carbon tax in place. And it sends a good signal, I think, that the government is committed to having a carbon tax and there is potential for the tax to increase in the future. So before the Climate Change Act comes into force, we already have a carbon tax that through the excise tax mechanism that raises awareness to businesses and consumers, and hopefully that would get them started preparations for the incoming carbon tax under the Climate Change Act. Let me also say that in Thailand, we are thinking of using both the ETS and the carbon tax, but the targets of the programs are going to be different because ETS requires reporting by the companies. The design is that they would only be applied to the large companies or the large emitters, but the carbon tax is going to be applied mostly for the fossil fuels or the other sectors that are smaller, so that there is a clear segment in the use of the instruments. So that's it for the most.
you so much, Kanittha. So it's very interesting experience that we added carbon price to excise taxes. So some even call it effective carbon tax, because if you only look at carbon tax, let's say it's small, but if you add all the charges added to fossil fuel, like excise taxes, there is also environmental tax and so on, could be added, diesel tax. If you add all of that, then some people call it effective carbon price. Yeah, so this is interesting how they added it to excise tax for now. Yeah, so these questions we answered so far were more like country specific. As I said, we have countries like People's Republic of China who already have some years of experience, and countries who are recently implementing. But now let's go to a more difficult question. So how, like Yi Jiang in his presentation, he said that what's important is the international coordination, um, to increase international coordination and also coverage of carbon price globally, because otherwise the impact, of course, on countries could be negative. So there are two questions in a Q&A box from our audience related to that. First one is from Naoki Yoshina. He is former ADBI Dean. He's asking, international coordination in carbon pricing and carbon tax is needed. What is the best way to implement the unified carbon pricing and carbon tax in Asia region? This is a very difficult question. And another one related to that, from Yuji Yamashita. Climate change is a global challenge. If only some countries introduce carbon tax, I'm afraid carbon-heavy industries would move to countries where there is no carbon tax. To what extent is this scenario is likely? Do we already observe this kind of phenomenon? So I would like to ask panelists who wants to answer this difficult question, but I think maybe Shen Du, because China already had some years of experience. Maybe you can answer, but anyone, please, you can. Any of including Yi Jiang also.
Actually, it's really difficult to answer. Yes, China launched its national ETS since 2021, and it has experienced based on 7 to 9 pilots, regional pilots, carbon market domestically. So yes, we do have some experiences on how to cooperate or coordinate the carbon pricing inside China, because there are different pricing mechanism in the pilots regions. For example, we have different allowance allocation in Beijing, Shanghai, and Guangdong, and also they have different design for the auctioning rate, or how to treat with the revenue from the carbon market. So there are different mechanism and a different approach for each region. So to answer the question how to achieve international coordination, I think the first point is how to design unified ETS mechanism among the countries in Asia area, because I think according to the panelists mentioned, there are different approaches for carbon pricing inside Asia. For example, maybe Indonesia, they have their own maybe a combination for carbon tax and the carbon market, and also the carbon credits, the voluntary market design, and also Thailand has its own. So how to design a unified methodology? I mean, maybe we could touch upon what kind of industries will be included in the regional market, so that we could find some similarities in the benchmarking design, and also the allowance allocation, and also how to And secondly, I think maybe how to treat this kind of carbon allowance or carbon credits across the boundary is really essential for us to consider about, because as mentioned by the second questions, maybe if we only consider about carbon pricing mechanism in one country, there will be a linkage, carbon leakage for other countries. So how to guarantee each country to fulfill its NDC, and how to guarantee the regional targets could be achieved by this kind of regional trading. So it really needed a very cautious design for the cross-boundary transition for the carbon allowance and carbon credits. So it's related to a system, a systematic design. For example, the standard unified standards and for the trading mechanism and the transparency of the data. I mean, both for the compliance markets as well as the voluntary markets, so that we could ensure the fairness of the buyers and sellers inside this region. I'll stop here, and I think maybe our panelist has more answers about that.
Thank you very much. Anyone from panelists, please?
Yeah, maybe I can add just briefly. Actually, yeah, the question is right. There is always risks of the carbon leakage concern of the if there are no universal carbon pricing around the world. So actually, that's one of the rationales that EU launched there, the carbon border adjustment mechanism. So, but CBAM can be considered as two ways. The first one is that something good for contributing the achieving kind of the decarbonization at the global level, to put price carbon on the exports or exports from the countries without carbon pricing. But secondly, at the same time, it can be considered as a kind of the trade barrier as well for developing countries. But anyway, the most developing countries in Asian region, they should deal with that kind of the challenge of the CBAM. And then that's why, at least for Southeast Asian region, so many countries accelerated their process to introduce carbon pricing at their domestic level to deal with that, the international, the CBAM. And it's not only for EU. After EU announced that the CBAM, more countries such as UK, and then also UK announced their own CBAM as well. And then also other countries, including Canada and then United States, also they are considering to implement their own CBAM in future. So it's kind of the common, it is not only challenging from the EU, but can be also challenging from all of the advanced countries or developed countries for developing nations. So Southeast Asian region, if the country adopted the carbon pricing, the carbon tariff will be just the difference between the EU ETS market price and then their own the domestic carbon prices. So it can provide the government to kind of the motivation or the incentive to introduce their carbon pricing, because at least the government may have the revenue sources from their carbon pricing, and then also they can use that revenue for supporting their business and then the industries. But the issue is that the many developing countries, there are lack of the administrative capacity and then also resource capacity for implementing carbon pricing and the carbon market. So actually from the academic side, we are just at the initial stage to discuss about some creating benefits of the creating joint carbon market in the ASEAN region. So probably it would allow kind of the more sizable and a larger carbon market in the region, and then probably each countries can collaborate and then they share their carbon trading experience, and then so probably more experienced countries can share their know-how, and then the administrative issues with the less experienced countries. So yeah, so probably so in brief, the carbon leakage, the risks of carbon leakage exist, but to deal with them, more and more countries are considering the universal carbon pricing, and then to deal with them, the Southeast Asian countries are trying to make their effort to introduce their own carbon pricing schemes, and then they collaborate with each the other nations. Thank you.
I would like to invite, I think Riza wants to answer his question too, please.
Yeah, I think I'm trying to explain a bit different from a different angle, because IDCTA is a representative of or representing carbon project owners and developers. So the way I see it, there's too many arguments and discourse at the moment regarding promoting compliance market against voluntary ones. And I know that for carbon project developers, such as our association, for example, we are carbon voluntary market enablers and players, right? So I think the discourse has been so much pressures on the voluntary ones. And I do agree with previous speakers has mentioned how the let us align all kinds of initiatives. I don't want to see too many differentiation and clustering in a sense. So every effort's being segregated. But I think, like I said, every country has different landscape and challenges. Adopting or implementing or implications of CBAM, for example, like Jeong Won said, that there's some positive and negative impact of it. They do somehow have a very positive intent that everyone should have the same playing field. But unfortunately, exporters like from developing countries unable to include carbon offsets from the original country. But I think Europe at the moment just receive money, just receive the cash rather than offsets, even though the offsets are internationally standardized using the best possible market accepted standard. So these kind of segregation or red tapes or hurdles, I think, needs to be more adaptive, to be more open, because I think our aim is to combat climate change rather than just taking profiteering in between. Maybe that's my my other comments. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So that was a quite difficult question, and I think we cannot answer. We need a separate seminar on this international collaboration on carbon price. And I just want to say that IMF proposed to have carbon price floor with all countries adopting minimum lowest carbon price depending on their income level. But as you heard from presentation from Yi Jiang, that most countries still don't have carbon price. Yeah. So thank you so much, all panelists, for trying to answer this difficult question. And we have so many questions in Q&A box, but so I'm having very hard time to choose. So sorry that I cannot pick all the questions. So let me pick one more question on the subsidies. The question is it advisable for a country that have subsidies to also implement carbon pricing? Yi Jiang, I know you covered this topic in your report, so please.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Dina. So this is a very interesting question. So I guess in the real world, there are such cases that the government want to both retain the fossil fuel subsidies and impose some kind of carbon pricing on the emission. So I think in theory, I think this is better than the fossil fuel subsidy only for this country in terms of carbon emission reduction. I think in the presence of fossil fuel subsidies, it's still welcome to have the carbon pricing policies. However, I would still like to emphasize that it is imperative and urgent to reduce and finally phase out the fossil fuel subsidies, which don't make economic sense, don't support the climate goals or support the fiscal sustainabilities. So I think reducing, if there's significant fossil fuel subsidy in a country, the priority is still to lower it, reduce it. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Yi. And I would like to invite Kanittha to also answer the same question on subsidies, fossil fuel subsidies.
Yes, so Thailand actually has both the fossil fuel subsidy and also a carbon pricing policy. So I think my take on it is I agree with Yi. Ideally, we would like to phase out all subsidies and just have the carbon price. But I think in the interim period, in the transition from the existing status quo to a future with carbon prices, having some subsidies in place can make it more politically palatable as a tool to get the public a higher public acceptance. So we slowly drop down the subsidies and then slowly increase carbon prices, and ultimately that would make it more implementable. Because if we begin right off by saying that we will remove all the subsidies and we will impose a carbon price, it's good in economic terms in theory, but implementation wise, it might be very difficult. So in Thailand, we take the stance that we still need to retain some energy subsidies, especially energy to the lower income households or the small SMEs businesses. But we would ideally want to phase this out, and we have a carbon price on top as well.
Thank you very much. Yeah, this question. Thank you so much for this question, because fossil fuel subsidies, it's widespread in developing Asia Pacific, right? So we cannot talk about carbon price without talking about fossil fuel subsidies. And like Yi Jiang, he told me that fossil fuel subsidies is a negative carbon price. Yeah, so it's similar. And I think also similar to carbon price, raising public acceptance is important for fossil fuel subsidies. So that's the challenges countries are facing. So thank you so much, Yi and Kanittha, for answering about fossil fuel subsidies. So we have only 5 minutes left. I would like to invite, we have many questions unanswered. So thank you so much for our audience for posting so many questions. Sorry we couldn't answer them all. I would like to use this final 5 minutes inviting our panelists and presenter Yi Jiang for their final thoughts, maybe 1 or 2 minutes each. Please, 1 minute each. I would like to start with Yi Jiang, please.
Thanks, Dina. So I think this is a really good discussion, and I really appreciated the active participation from the panelists and the audience. So I think this is also, as I see, a process of building consensus. Consensus is really important, which will lead to smooth, transition to like a carbon pricing scenario, policy scenario. So I think we should have this kind of discussion built upon ADB's platform in the future, more such communication opportunities. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Shen, would you like?
Yes. Thanks for the opportunity to join the ADB webinar. I think for our country, China has a lot of challenges to figure out in order to improve its carbon pricing mechanism, but also it should consider how it will be interacting with international carbon pricing mechanism as well as the regional carbon pricing coordination. So as the world's largest emerging economy, China has a unique opportunity to share its experience, both successes and lessons, with other emerging and developing economies. So a well-designed functional ETS will play a critical role in achieving climate goals and to enable the energy transition with least cost. So we are looking forward to discuss more with our partners and maybe some colleagues from other countries. Thank you.
Jeong Won, please.
Yeah, thank you very much for this webinar. I think I want to highlight that the recent trends and the global carbon pricing environment. So actually, I think it's a common trend to increase the carbon pricing, the implementation of carbon pricing, and then also the expansion of sector coverage covered by the carbon pricing. So we will observe more and more countries and then more and more sectors will adopt carbon pricing in future. But actually, in that sense, we need to highlight and then focus on the effectiveness of carbon pricing as well. If the carbon pricing fails to reducing the greenhouse gas emissions at the planned level, probably the carbon pricing will be just additional the environmental regulation. It will lose kind of some legitimacy for and then the rationale for the implementation. So Yi's presentation and then also the years at the previous studies, we really confirmed that the scheme design is really important for the raising effectiveness. So each country has to carefully review the domestic conditions and then what kind of the carbon pricing type and then what kind of the revenue recycling the schemes and then also what kind of the other protectionist measures will be appropriate for their domestic conditions. So we should monitor the effectiveness of carbon pricing in future as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Riza, please.
Yeah, I think I'm just going to have two important things. Number one, we need pilot projects. I think in order for everybody to can really see if it works or not, it's a pilot project. This is what we did in Indonesia. That's why the government support us fully using pilot projects. Number two, I think financial support alignment. I know ADB has a very important role also in Asia. I hope that ADB can also support us. We do have signed ASEAN Common Carbon Framework, for example, and we are promoting the financial support alignment. So hopefully it can accelerate and speed up the carbon pricing as well as accelerating the carbon market. Thank you.
Thank you. And Kanittha, please.
So I think the message is pretty clear that carbon pricing is here to stay. So there will be more carbon prices and also in terms of border adjustment mechanisms in the future. So I think it's important to start now. Otherwise, it takes some time to build infrastructure. I also think that for developing countries, we actually benefit from being late bloomers because then we can learn from the experience of other countries and then see how that would come back to our countries and then design the pricing mechanisms in a way that minimizes the harm, at least in the transition period. And I also want to emphasize that even though it looks like a lot of things that needs to be done for the ETS and the carbon tax, it doesn't have to all start at once. So it can be done bit by bit as countries get ready. So in Thailand, it is something like that. And once the public and the politicians, they understand that this is the way forward and that all stakeholders agree, it's quite easy to make it happen.
Many thanks. Many thanks to all speakers. The time is the 60 minutes passed very fast. So before I close this seminar, please let me introduce you the next Asian Impact webinar, which will happen. Please sign up. And it will be topic measuring sustainability in global value chains. And it will be by my colleague, Joseph, who is principal statistician at Economic Research and Development Impact at ADB. So please, I invite everyone to sign up and looking forward to seeing you at the next Asian Impact webinar.